Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Room for Seconds. I have an incredible guest today, Zack Fishman. In full disclosure, my PR agency does an incredibly kick-ass job for us. But the purpose of today is one, get to know him, what he does, but we're going to talk about how to build a cult brand through PR and advertising. How can you help elevate yourself so you can be the next great thing? Because without getting the fans and the raving fans into this, you can't be successful. You can't be the next Raising Cane's. So Zack, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's weird to be on the other side of the mic, but it's exciting. So thanks for having me on as a guest. It's a long time coming. I feel like we've been trying to figure this out for a couple months now, but happy we nailed the time.
Yeah, my schedule sort of gets effed up a lot.
I hear you. It's okay. You're a busy man, but thanks for taking the time.
So why don't you give everyone just a brief little bit about where you are, what you do, and how you got into the family business, but really have made it your own.
Yeah, well, thank you for noticing that. I try my best to kind of stake my own claim as, and I would say really within what we do here at Fishman. The business has been around for now 33 years in August. My mother is the founder of the agency, and has been in franchise PR her entire career. My father joined her about 7 months after they got married, and they've been doing it together pretty much ever since.
I still don't know how they do that. That's amazing, but
I don't know either. We've been talking about it at the kitchen table all the time, even when we shouldn't be. God love my fiance. She listens to it and is great about it, and honestly adds color to certain things at this point because she just knows franchising quite well now just by being around us by osmosis. So it's interesting for sure being in a family business. I joined the agency a little over 5 years ago now. My heritage was really in the tech side of franchising. So I was at a supplier that primarily was servicing the franchise development side, and got a chance to really get to know a lot of really awesome, executives in that world. That's really how I, gained my rise. It was very cheap and really wonderful for a really young person like myself to be selling because I basically got as many swings of the bat as humanly possible. And it, of course, is really what we do here at Fishman day in and day out. Our goal, as you kind of hinted on earlier, is to be, really the brand steward or really the brand Sherpa for, any restaurant brand and even many other industries that we probably won't talk about today, to help to educate their franchise candidate, right? And a lot of brands in the franchise space, especially in restaurants, take on many different forms. Some of them are completely reemerging out of bankruptcy and the like. Some of them are teeny tiny and had one little corporate location. And they're really trying to have a go at the franchise model in general. And some of our brands are, they are not only cult classes, but they're household names already. And our job is to continue to steer them, through the different tranches that franchising, of course, always brings. There's a lot of different inflection points that brands run into, as I know that you've talked about quite a bit with me privately and also I'm sure publicly too. And you have brands of many different aspects of that, of course, under your umbrella today. So, we can get into really how we help to steer people based off of where they are in their life cycle, but that is really what we do.
yeah, and you do a great job. And I'll be frank, I've known your dad for a long time. And if it wasn't for you, I probably wouldn't have come over because of a friendship and all that. But you were the next generation and saw and thought differently about how to use PR. And that it shouldn't just be a one-trick pony. It's just not press. It's social media. It's other avenues. And you and I got to know each other, and it became crystal clear to me that you, like I look at the restaurant industry, see more from media side of stuff to help build brands. So what triggered for you to sort of make that jump? Why was it just not the old-fashioned PR anymore? Why did you decide that it had to be media and the other things that you talk about all the time?
Yeah, I think that the first thing is that the landscape, as I'm sure many people that are listening have probably determined by now, has really, really changed since, I know since you've gotten into the industry, Greg, and even since when I've gotten into the industry, it really has changed how people are looking, at media. When I first got into franchising 8 years ago now, I guess on a full-time basis, I was always part-time, so to speak, just by being around it all the time. But Podcasts really weren't a big deal at all. Things like this just weren't really happening. And this has really been, it's decentralized, sure, but I think it has been really impactful for people to create, their own persona from a thought leadership standpoint, rather by, being on as a guest all the time or having your own. I've had my own podcast for probably about 7.5 years now with my partner in crime. And I think that for us in the very early days, wasn't really a lot of people doing it. We kind of had to explain what a podcast was, which is interesting, and that's really what PR has become a lot more than just the traditional print that you used to see. And of course, there is new business TV, which I would say is declining in the amount of places that you can actually get covered in business TV, but B, I think that podcasts have really opened up a whole new opportunity for people to create thought leadership for themselves, and not only for themselves, but for their brand too. And I think that that's really is that the amount of places in which you can be covered has decreased over time. Media has contracted. I would say B, the way that media is looked upon has changed, and kind of the idea behind franchise PR really being lead generation has changed a lot. When my parents first got into this industry, it was just there was this really blurry and strange, gray area where PR was almost looked upon as a lead gen tool similar to advertising that you would see, in the newspaper, the classified ads, as my father consistently brings up to me. The good old days is when people used to put a classified ad in USA Today. They would do it in the Wall Street Journal. They would do it in Entrepreneur and all these different places. And that was really, I guess the portal before the portal. It was the paper portal, as my dad likes to call it, right? And as that evolved, I think the way that PR evolved, it didn't quite change as fast as that did. There wasn't really an innovation, and so I think, like any good PR pitch, the way that we were speaking about it had to change, and so we almost had to spin our own industry, which is really interesting. And that inflection point for how the industry changed happened to kind of coincide with when I started 5 years ago. It was like just before the pandemic. We were starting to see a bit of a shift, but the pandemic really nailed it home, where we had to kind of look at it as, PR is about having as many different touch points as possible. So by the time that people are getting on the phone with somebody from your team, Greg, they're going to know way more than they used to. And that's ultimately the point, is that we want them to see as many different stories about as many different facets of your business as possible. So they feel like they're comfortable with spending the money that they're likely going to spend, but B, the deal will go faster. It's all about deal velocity in our business nowadays. It's not necessarily about, lead gen. It's about the awareness and how quickly somebody is going to feel comfortable putting down tens of or hundreds of thousands of dollars with your business.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly the podcast and all that. We do this to give back. We do this because we want to educate, but we're doing it for the same time so people know that we know what the hell we're talking about.
Yep.
And, it's if you're constantly out there in today's world, especially for those younger generations, and they're seeing you and your brands, they you start to build this loyalty even before they even thought about being a franchise or buying a franchise from you or even going into your restaurant. The more they see you, they have this love that starts to happen. And social media has made the love a lot harder to obtain, but
Mhm.
these short snippets and everything else that you're doing, it's so important because that's the way now they're digesting everything. They don't want to read a, feature article. They want something in 10 seconds where they can scroll through and get to know you. And they want to see it over the next 30 days popping into their feed. So you always got to be on. I mean, PR and marketing has gotten so much harder because of that. And it's why people are now doing stuff like podcast or this or writing articles and, the other publications or your newsletter, your article that you put out,
Mhm.
it's so in depth, but you're doing it to continue to learn. And it's so important
Yeah,
in today's
absolutely.
way.
Absolutely. I think that one thing that I think is important to underline and underscore here is that, a lot of these brands back in the day used to just say, we're opening up a location here and we're going to have this many open there. And that was like huge news back then. And that would get covered pretty frequently. But nowadays, I think it is harder. It is harder not only for us to secure media for our clients, but it's harder to find people to actually do this job as well. Because I think what we find is that back in the day, it was a lot. I mean, I don't want to diminish it, but it was a little bit easier to get covered because A, there was just more media out there, but B, franchising was a little bit more new. And I think that nowadays people, I mean, relatively speaking, there is not really a lot of awareness around it, but there's a lot more than there used to be. Um, and I think that the onus is on my staff and many others that do this in the space to teach their people the art of franchising and not just the idea of PR. It's about actually, I need these people reading all the franchise trades and the restaurant trades and general business and understanding that, the Fed, raised and lowered things based off of this many basis points and how it's going to affect franchising. Like I'm almost putting my staff, through the ringer and thinking, they have to be schooled in franchise economics. Like they have to understand this stuff because they need to know, how a brand is going to be affected based off of X, Y, and Z. And that is really where we're able to make the difference nowadays is we have to be smarter. Franchising is more professionalized, so we need to act like it on our side too. So that has changed drastically as well.
I'm Greg Majewski, and I've been a multi-unit operator for 26 years. I know how great it feels owning the right franchise brand, but choosing the right franchisor feels even better. At Craveworthy Brands, our hospitality-driven culture sets us apart because we're invested in your success at every single stage of your journey. We're operators alongside you, paving the way forward to give you a head start on greatness. Start your franchise journey at craveworthybrands.com. Yeah, I mean, that's been a big thing. I remember, hey, we sold 17 stores at Jimmy John's and we got the side column of Nation's Restaurant News and we were so excited. Now who the hell even reads Nation's Restaurant News as an actual magazine? You're getting it digitally. You're not looking at that. You're not seeing that when it comes in. But every week we were waiting to get the publication, and that's all gone now. Now it's the other avenues. So when you start a brand or you're starting in this, how do you get the cult-like following? How can PR help you develop something that's so unique so you get that big pop in those lines and the excitement? Because food doesn't cut it anymore. As much as we all in my industry say that, oh, my food has got to be first and it has to be, food's got to be great, but that's not what gets the lines going anymore. It's this cult following that happens through people's social media that sort of drives that traffic more and more every year. How do you guys help with that?
Yeah, so I would actually say it depends on the type of industry it is within food and beverage. So for instance, I like to divide things based off of kind of like sweets and treats versus core meal, right? And I think that many in the restaurant space do this too. I would say sweets and treats, beverage also fits into this too, to a degree. It kind of depends, but with sweets and treats, I think it's kind of about what's the moment, right? It's about sweets and treats is very much like an impulse buy, right? You walk in, the cookie space right now, for instance, which very well, is a space in which has been in the spotlight for a couple years here. And I think that, historically speaking, the dessert space moves a bit faster in terms of consumer taste and preference than the core meal space does. And so for us, it's up to us to be able to tackle that moment and trying to create as much excitement around that brand, but also talking about why it's going to have staying power in the future. That's really the hardest part, for that particular industry that I have found. Beverage fits into this too. Like, for instance, there's a brand that we represent called Fizz Drinks that is kind of in the dirty soda industry at the moment. I would say Swig has made it quite famous and Fizz is really number 2 in the world, on that behind them. But the candid part of this is that, dirty soda is very popular in areas where Mormons reside, and that's pretty much where it has been limited up until now. But the honest truth is that, do we know if that will change? Like, we're not sure. And so part of our job is to really tell the story behind why we think this is something, that has staying power in the future. That's the tough part, right? Is being able to do that, creating thought leadership around and tying that excitement that you're getting on the consumer side with the actual numbers that should follow, talking about how they're innovating their menu and adding different SKUs, but not irresponsibly doing so, but doing so in a way where it's not going to be a one-trick pony, to your point that you made earlier. Whereas I think core meal, I find I find to be a lot more focused on the founder first. The founder and their story first, especially if they're coming from somewhere within the restaurant space and they start something new, is always really helpful. We have a lot of that. People sell off their company and then they decide they want to go back for more and they start a new one. Um, we also find that the franchisees, especially if it's a brand that is in early-ish in their life cycle, but they're franchisees that invested in the brand at that early point, are really great spokespeople for the brand as well and really do a great job of telling that story. Brands that are in the very beginning leading with technology first often do, have the ability to become a pretty cultish brand within the franchise space in terms of franchise sales, simply because it shows that they're investing in infrastructure at a very early point, which is fairly rare. And I'd say that the last thing too is honestly around the idea of how much they're giving to the community. That's really something that we think about quite a bit over here. Is that it is one of the very few things that ties together getting people into the locations to try the food, but also buying it at the same time. It's about the values that the brand has and how much you really buy into that. Some people invest in brands simply because they see that they are giving to a certain charity that really speaks to them and it's within the ethos of their brand. And that's something that we try to illuminate as much as possible. Brand mission and values does, a really great job of really creating excitement and I guess devotion to a brand. It's something that many brands have ridden on over the years. Jersey Mike's is a really great example of a brand that has had charity, basically, weaved within the ethos and the very fabric of their brand. And Peter Cran Crow has done a really great job of doing that. And a lot of brands try to emulate something very similar.
Yeah, and if it's not truly heartfelt, like in Jersey Mike's side, it's really in his DNA. That is who
Mhm.
he is.
Yeah.
So the brand's able to catapult. You have other brands that try to act that way, but it's not built into their DNA, and they never have the same success. If you're going to whatever you're going to do, you have to be 100% authentic. More so today than ever. You can't fake it anymore. You
No.
know, and the brands that are authentic and lean into what they are the ones that are thriving. I mean, look at Raising Cane's, look at Chick-fil-A, look at Jersey Mike's.
Mhm.
I mean, they leaned into what they did. Look at what we did at Jimmy John's. We leaned into delivery, what we were, Freaky Fast. I mean, and we ran with those. And that's what I still think is the bread and butter of what we are in any group and how you can move forward. So you're doing this. Where do you think the industry changes? What's next? What should people be on the lookout for?
I think that brands are becoming relatively interwoven with the people that are helming them. I think nowadays it has become a lot more common. Podcasts is a reason for that, but also I think that thought leadership on LinkedIn has become really popular, and we definitely have been, really have been riding that train quite a bit. It's probably our fastest growing service that we have here. It doesn't really have a lot to do with SEO on your brand's website, off page, on page, any of those things. It's not really that helpful. Sure, you can link back to your brand's site if you want to, but the entire point is to create a personality for your brand and kind of tie it to, really that visionary. And I think that in a lot of ways, that's where we've gone. And I think that makes multi-unit, multi-brand operators especially feel a lot more comfortable when they see somebody who's really smart, that has a really big opinion on a lot of different things that are plaguing, or really, I guess, things that are happening in the restaurant industry generally that may be a bit more neutral and not always negative, because not everything has to be negative. But I think that is always really interesting to me. I think that will continue a lot more, simply because I think that people are going to care about the people and the brand that they're investing in. They always have, but I think that they're caring a lot more about that. They're almost following along to the person as much as the brand. The rise of the influencer in the business world, I think will continue. We've seen that on the consumer side, but that's really going to start to happen a lot more on the business side. We talk about, back in the day, it used to be authors that were really the people in business that people gravitated to. But nowadays, I think it's podcast hosts and people on TikTok and on X and things of that nature that are really giving rise to, what we will see in the future. Many of them have spoken at the IFA convention and are starting to speak elsewhere. And some of them are even starting to invest in the franchise space too. So I think that that is where the industry will go, at least from a PR perspective. And how that relates to the restaurant space in particular is that I think that you will actually start to find business influencers taking paid posts and subscriptions, based off of mentioning brands. We've seen that with the Wolf of Franchising, who that's his pseudonym, but I know him very well and I won't reveal his name, but he is somebody amongst many others that are really trying to build themselves almost up as a business influencer. People pay him to actually be on his Twitter and on his newsletter, right? And I think that there will be more and more people like that. And I think that that's just an interesting place where we will find that the restaurant space likely will be going in the future as well.
Yeah, the Wolf of Franchising, everyone loves reading it. And the fact that, it's gone that way. What made all that so great was that it was like authentic and, the authentic self again. And he was ahead of the time with what he was publishing and sort of owns the market now on that little section,
Yeah. Oh,
which
yeah.
is cool.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, he's my age too. Like I can say that. I mean, like we
Hey, you're
we
gonna give
worked.
it away.
No, I mean, like, but that's okay though. Like
Right.
he is me, but I'm saying like he is like right around my age. I'm like I'm a 31-year-old guy, right? Like he got interested in franchising and just devoted his time and to perfecting his craft, and that's what mattered to him. And I think that we're gonna find that too. Is that there's a lot of really hungry people that want to get involved in this space that follow it just like they follow fantasy football, right? Like that's what I do. I mean, like people call me a geek for it, but hey, I really like it. It's something that I enjoy doing, and I like looking at the trends, just like people like looking at Bitcoin too. It's the same thing to me. So
Yeah, I always get a kick out of it because I'm like, why? And when I'm out or I speak somewhere and they're like, oh, I follow you here and all your stuff is great. And it's like, really? Like
yeah,
it catches me completely by surprise how many people actually follow you and look for you to post or comment on certain things. Um, now I'm a little blunt at times and I call all of us out, when we screw up, but I also think that's what makes people want to listen to you. You can't, there's no holding back when you do it. You got to speak the truth,
absolutely.
and the CEO from Chase is a perfect example. He sort of has become the brand, and he's
Mhm.
brash, he's out there, but that's the new age of a CEO or a president or a leader in this industry. You've got to be willing to speak your mind. Um, and again, be authentic when you do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Authenticity is king, like we say around our office. That is something that we talk about a lot. So it's definitely something that will continue. How that continues and under what form, it always changes. But the idea and the fabric of that is really the entire point of why I get up in the morning, at least for what we do in our business.
So, on a personal note, I know you got engaged recently, getting married soon. So, ready for the big change in life?
I think so. My fiance is actually at her bachelorette right now. She just left about an hour ago. And
Ah,
so I never really know what's happening, but she's got 20 girls up in New Buffalo, Michigan, which I know you know very well because you're from the area, Greg. But I think that it's going to be a very big change, but I also need the stability as well. I think that being in a business that is consistently changing, like we have here in franchising, you need to have that stable person in your life that keeps you grounded. I can be a little bit all over the place because I'm trying to be a superhero for a lot of people. And I try to be that for her too. But I think that she also accepts me for the days that I want to be ordinary and I just want to like relax and do nothing, which is rare for me. But it's like almost a vulnerability when I am like not consistently moving around everywhere. And she's the person that I can do that with, which is great. And I'm definitely very excited for it. We just got a new house too, so I'm sitting in my new office and a lot of change in 2024. But excited for what the future brings.
that's awesome. Now, New Buffalo is not your Vegas trip by any means, so you're a lot safer than stuff that happens in the movies.
No,
But
no, it's not. I mean, I'm going to London for mine, so it's definitely a very different it's a very different trip. So, but again, I will say for the folks who know my family, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but my father will be joining us on my bachelor party. So I'm not entirely sure if that means that it's going to be
you're in
crazier
trouble.
or tamer. I don't really know.
No,
I kind of
crazier.
alternate on the day.
It's definitely crazier.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think so too. It would probably be better if he wasn't coming in that regard, but I have a father that can outdrink me. What can I say?
Well, and you guys are extremely close, and close families make great, you know, if you have great parents, great kids tend to happen because they're always with you and always part of your life, even afterwards. And, you definitely have that. Both your parents are continually on and care and so proud, you know? So
I
it's
hope
very,
so.
very cool to see.
Absolutely. Well, thank
So,
you. No, yeah, I certainly hope so.
so Zach, tell everyone where they can find your podcast.
Sure. So you guys can all go to www.franchisors.com. On that website, you'll find a whole host of things, the events that we run. But in addition to that, Modrn Business is going to be linked on there. That is the home of Modrn Business and has been for about 18 months now. We've at this point probably done a little under 500 episodes now. We have I would say the craziest thing that we have done with that podcast is that in our early to mid 20s, depending on which one of us it was, between Ryan and I, we rented out an RV bus and went around the country and interviewed tons of people all across the country, and that was really how we got our big start. But we did 100 plus episodes on that trip, so we've done 400 between all that, but 100 in about 60 days. So really do love doing it, similar to what you're doing here, Greg. And it's something that I love to give back with and try to provide as much guidance to people who need it as possible. So, but that's where you find it, is www.franchisors.com.
Yeah, it's a good one. So you definitely should take a listen. Everybody, that's another episode, though, for Room for Seconds. Zach, thank you for being my guest. If my sponsors want to hurry up and finish here, we'll get your name up on the beautiful new board. But in the meantime, we're presented by Craveworthy. Check us out and all our franchise brands at craveworthybrands.com. Hit the subscribe button down below. Zach, you're an incredible guest and a great friend. Thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely. Cheers, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Hey viewers, thanks again for supporting Room for Seconds. If you found this episode inspiring, interesting, or any bit informative, please hit that little subscribe button down at the bottom so you never miss an episode. In my 26 years in this amazing industry, I've been blessed with incredible mentorship. This show is my way of giving back. Follow me on LinkedIn, search Greg Majewski, on Twitter @Greg_Majewski. If you still have room for more, visit our website at media.craveworthybrands.com. You'll find more videos, shows, notes, blogs, resources, and an easy way to get in touch with the Craveworthy Brands team. I'm your host, Greg Majewski. Thanks again for tuning in to Room for Seconds.